Welcome back to the divisional round of my weekly NFL Pick'em. Before I get started, I've got to address all the people that told me the Cowboys would lose.
The pause in Dallas's offense elevates the potency of Seattle's defense. And that's what I'm saying, okay?
Prescott gonna carry. And
ladies and gentlemen, we got it.
first and goal at the one.
Alright, and I usually don't go over the games from the previous week, but since we're in the playoffs and there's only 4 games, I'm going to recap what I saw from the losing teams, clarify my stance from last week's predictions a little, and deliver my eulogy for the teams that saw their season come to an end. Also, stay tuned to the end of this video because I'm going to make some playoff superlatives. So I'm going to go over the most likely twos for things like pulling the upset, or who I think will throw the most touchdowns for you daily fantasy users, or who I think might get shut down, or get blessed by the refs. Now let's get down to these wildcard games real quick. In Colts versus Texans, the Texans offense was clearly hurt by the lack of playmakers. Their passing game suffers from a similar issue that kind of worries me about the Saints in the playoffs also. You would assume that a top 5 wide receiver can carry an offense, but when he's the only threat that a defense has to truly worry about, they just shade coverage over to their side and they make you beat them with whatever else you got. That's why Kiki QT had such a big day. I really liked this Texans offense with Demaryius Thomas, but I thought Bill O'Brien could still get them past a divisional rival at home. You guys acted like I was disrespecting Frank Reich by not acknowledging the Colts 1-5 starts, and that's my fault because I thought by comparing him in the same sentence that 1-5 start was just a given, because it's all anyone's been talking about with the Colts for the past month or so. It's like when announcers feel the need to remind us that Chris Hogan played lacrosse or that Jimmy Graham and Antonio Gates played basketball. We already know that, but that's my fault. I can't assume that you guys are mind readers and you know what I'm thinking, so I'll do a better job of explaining that stuff in the future. But this Colts team is legit. Andrew Luck is the NFL MVP, and any other season that doesn't have another quarterback put up 50 touchdowns. Let me stop right there because I'm going to hype them up later when we get to the divisional round picks. The Texans, they need to use as many resources as possible this offseason to solidifying this offensive line, because Deshaun Watson took a David Carr level beating this year, and you saw how that worked out for David Carr in the past. In the Seahawks versus the Cowboys, I already rubbed it in a little bit for Seahawks fans, so I don't think that I need to double down on that. And it's easy to point fingers at Brian Schottenheimer, the offensive coordinator, because he stuck to the game plan even when it wasn't working, but that's been their game plan all season long. I think they underestimated the Cowboys defense and just assumed that they'd still be able to run the ball, and the game was never really out of hand where they were forced to get out of that game plan. The Sebastian Janikowski injury seemed like it forced them to get a little more aggressive and go for it on 4th down, but in the end it really just gave Shotty another chance to call a running play on 3rd down. When you've got Russell Wilson, you can't force the offense to live and die with only passing on 3rd and long. This run heavy offense is what turned around their season and took the pressure off of their defense, and everything seemed to come together after that. But in this game they just needed to adjust, and they didn't. Chargers versus Ravens. There was a combination of the Chargers defense, the Ravens offensive line, and playoff jitters that put the Ravens in an early hole that they just didn't have enough time to climb out of. I'd like to think that my statement about the Chargers being the first team to see this Lamar Jackson offense for the 2nd time was probably the best point that I made altogether last week.
I am the smart. I am the smart. S-M-R-T. S-M-A-R-T.
Because you saw the difference that it made early on. The Ravens have been using an offense that is unique from any other team in the league, so the Chargers threw a look at the Ravens that hadn't been seen all year. What really surprised me in this game was how quickly Ravens fans turned on Lamar Jackson and started booing him like he didn't just win 6 out of the last 7 to steal the division from the hated rival Steelers. It wasn't a great day, but he showed resilience, the coaching staff stuck by him, and he made some big plays to make it interesting. Guys, Lamar Jackson is going to be fine. Get the man some gloves so he can stop putting the ball on the ground so much, put a little weight on him in the offseason so he can play a full year and not have to worry about injuries, and then work on his accuracy so he can hit those outside throws a little more consistently. Eagles at Bears. I would love to rub it in and say that I told you so and that the Bears should have allowed the Vikings into the playoffs over the Eagles, but honestly I think the Bears fans have suffered enough. This was the most heartbreaking loss of the weekend in so many different ways, but in the end you lost by 1 point to the defending Super Bowl champs. The biggest criticism for the Bears is that they knew that Cody Parkey was going to be a liability all season and still went into a playoff game with him as their kicker. But you live and you learn.
We live by another day.
We live a day and a day.
And I've seen the video where people are claiming that the kick was tipped a little bit, which would have altered the projection of the ball altogether, and in a game of inches, it could have been the difference between making it and not making it. Either way, Cody Parkey's been a liability, the field goal unit has been a liability for them, and it was ultimately the demise of the 2018 edition of the Chicago Bears. But playoff experience is something you can't draft or sign in free agency, and this team is built for some continuity for the next few years. Mitch Trubisky will have another year in his offensive system next year, and with these wide receivers, so he should continue to make strides as a passer, and I'm sure Cody Parkey will be replaced in the offseason, whether or not you want to blame him for missing that kick. But the Bears will be easy favorites to hold down the NFC North once again going into 2019. Alright, let's go over some of the picks from last week in the Pick'em group. Here are the top entries from Wildcard Weekend, and only 10 people got all 4 games right. That shows you how challenging it is to predict these playoff games. I went 2-2, and the 2 games I got wrong were definitely the ones that I felt the least confident about. If you've been following me for a majority of the regular season, you know I'm a big supporter of home field advantage being a tiebreaker in games that you're undecided on. But the only home team to win this week was the Cowboys. 2016 was the last time that more road teams won on Wildcard Weekend than home teams, and that was a clean sweep. But I remember how mind-blowing that was because it's always been more likely that the home teams are going to run the table than the road teams. But either way, the wild card hasn't given us a Super Bowl winner since the Ravens beat the 49ers in Super Bowl 47. That was the end of a span of 5 years in which we had 3 wild card Super Bowl winners. So for a while there, it seemed like wild card might be the way to go to maintain that momentum going into the playoffs. But the odds have been against these wild card teams for the last 6 seasons, and it'll be interesting to see if this is the year it swings back and one of these wild card teams can actually make it to the Super Bowl. Before we get started, I want to thank you guys for helping me crush the goal of 500 likes last week. Once again, even though last week's video was easily my most disliked video yet, the rest of you subjective fans watching these videos were able to help me continue to grow this channel. Don't tell all those whiny fans that can't handle somebody picking against their team though. But what's funny about all these salty people hitting the dislike button and raging in the comments is that they're still helping this video because YouTube promotes videos that people like or dislike. They want videos that get you engaged. But I make these videos for the people that like them, so please hit that like button once again. The goal is 500 likes as always, but I might bump it up for the championship game if we do well this week also. Alright, the moment we've been waiting for, let's get into these divisional round games. Chargers at Patriots. The Chargers were not a popular pick against the Ravens, but I think that they showed just how talented that they are on both sides of the ball. I've been hyping up this team since the preseason, and with Joey Bosa finally back, you're really starting to see the defense emerge as one of the stronger units in the league. In a weekend where most of the top defenses lost, it's important to have that balance between the offense and the defense. The Chargers can drop 35 on you, or they can hold you to 17. But this week, they have to travel back to the East Coast again to Foxborough to take on the living legend himself, Tom Brady. Philip Rivers has had a Hall of Fame career himself, despite his lack of playoff success for the last decade. The Chargers finally got a legit roster around him again, and he responded with leading them to the second most wins in the NFL this year. The only reason they're on the road is because they had another top team in their division, but that actually may be working to their advantage this year. The Chargers are undefeated outside of California, which I'm sure you'll hear once or twice leading up to this game, along with the stat that Philip Rivers is 0-7 against Tom Brady in his career. And I know that Patriots fans are going to be on their soapbox yelling this stat in defense of anyone that picks against their team this week, but honestly, a stat like that just proves my previous point about the weak rosters that the Chargers have fielded in the past, because that head-to-head record is not a reflection on Philip Rivers himself. The Patriots are still a damn good football team, don't get me wrong, but this group is not the dominant squad we've seen recently. Everybody is a little bit older, a little bit slower, and they haven't injected enough youth into this roster, especially on the defense. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick are not going to be enough to win this game this year. The matchup I'm really excited to see is Derwin James against Rob Gronkowski, and as much as I'm a self-proclaimed Patriots hater, Gronk has been one of my favorite players of all time, and I think he'll go down as the best tight end in NFL history. And that's why it's been excruciatingly difficult to watch the shell of himself this year. If Josh Gordon was still able to suit up for the Patriots, I'd be more inclined to follow my childhood rule of never betting against Belichick and Brady, especially not in the playoffs. But my eyes tell me that this Patriots team is just not as good as this Chargers team. Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa are going to be the difference makers in this one. Knock Brady around a little early on, and he gets happy feet. It's been the recipe for knocking the Patriots out of the playoffs since the beginning of time. Not many teams have had the personnel or the coaching to scheme it up, but in this case, the Chargers have both. Chargers win 29-27. Cowboys at Rams. So most of you know this by now because I've shared it in the past, but I don't like to shout it from the rooftops on the internet because the stigma that comes with it. But I am a die-hard, eat, sleep, live, and breathe type of Dallas Cowboys fan. It's a weird flex, I know, but I like to think I'm able to look at my team from a subjective point of view, and I recognize that they have their strengths, they have their weaknesses, but I'm realistic about it. And that's how I was able to build up my Twitter account over the years. I'm sharing this with you now because it's pretty hard to be subjective after a playoff win like that, especially when there's only been 3 in the past 20 years or so, but I'm gonna do my best here. My initial reaction to this matchup after Cody Parkey missed that field goal was relief, actually. I didn't want to go to New Orleans and play the Saints. Yes, the Cowboys already beat the Saints this year, but I know that the Saints really wanted their shot at the Cowboys again here, and revenge can be one of the most impactful motivators in sports. The Rams have been my Super Bowl pick for quite a while now, and I still think that they've been, at worst, one of the top 3 teams in the league at any given point in the season, but this is the better matchup for the Cowboys and still gives them a chance to host the NFC Championship game if the Eagles are able to pull off a miracle in New Orleans. The headlining matchup in this game will be the strengths of both teams facing off, the Rams offense versus the Cowboys defense. The Rams offense wasn't playing as well in the final month of the season as the previous two, but I think Todd Gurley being fresh is going to make a big difference, which brings us to an even bigger matchup within these two units, Todd Gurley versus the Cowboys linebackers, Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch. When these teams played in 2017 in Dallas, Gurley chewed them up with Sean Lee missing the game, but a healthy Sean Lee only played in 4 snaps against the Seahawks because these two young linebackers are just that good. And Cowboys assistant defensive coordinator Chris Richard spent some time with the Seahawks, and they've been one of the few teams to really challenge the Rams offense during the past few seasons, so he'll be able to contribute to the slowing of this Rams offense. The Rams defense, however, has been their Achilles heel all year, despite having the best defender in football. Their prized cornerback duo that was signed in the offseason was in and out of the lineup over the course of the year, so that's part of the reason why they are so inconsistent when defending the pass. But the run defense was poor all year long, and they're giving up 5.1 yards per carry, which is worst in the league. Ezekiel Elliott has to be licking his chops with this matchup. Another coaching aspect of this matchup that I'm interested in is Jason Garrett's familiarity with Wade Phillips' defensive scheme. Wade was the head coach when Jason Garrett was the Cowboys offensive coordinator, and you know he's the kind of guy that's going to keep notes from their time together, so I'm sure he knows the intricacies of this Rams defense. It's going to come down to Dak Prescott, who is coming off one of the biggest games of his career against the Seahawks last week, and he still struggles with accuracy more than your average quarterback, but the way that he can show up in big moments and put the team on his back is pretty incredible. It seems like a lazy comparison when he came out of college, but he really does perform like Tim Tebow. He's a way better passer, which I know it's not saying much, but he's got that biggest kid on the playground mentality and doesn't throw many interceptions. Dak has been historically efficient in game-winning drives throughout his 3 seasons, so the Cowboys just have to keep this game close and they'll feel confident they can win at the end. If the Cowboys win this game, it is because Ezekiel Elliott puts the team on his back this week and keeps the defense fresh by owning the time of possession. But I think that these Rams corners are a bad matchup for Dak because of their aggression, and they're going to be able to jump a couple of passes early on. He's been really close to throwing some pick sixes lately and is likely due one here. Rams win 31-26. Colts at Chiefs. I'll say it again, the Colts are legit. This team is so much different with Andrew Luck and some decent coaching. They're running the ball with an old school playoff mentality, and that might actually be the strength of the offense right now. It's amazing how Quentin Nelson has transformed one of the softest offensive lines in recent memory into one of the nastiest road graders in the league. Colts defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus was one of my favorite assistant coaches when he was the Cowboys linebacker coach, and I was sad to see him go, but he's coaching his way into a head coaching job as early as 2019 with the turnaround that he's done with one of 2017's worst defenses in the league. He's gonna have his hands full this week though. The quarterback play wasn't great in the wild card round, but this matchup should be different. Andrew Luck and Patrick Mahomes were 2 of the best 3 quarterbacks in the NFL this year, with Breeze as the only other guy in that conversation. The NFL MVP is able to put up points in bunches, and yes, I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes, and he's been doing it in ways that we've never seen before with some of this Mahomes magic. Arrowhead is a tough place to play, but the Chiefs haven't won a home playoff game since 1993 when Joe Montana was their quarterback, and they've actually lost to the Colts in the playoffs 5 times since then, with 3 of them being home losses. The most memorable loss was that game in Indianapolis where Alex Smith got the Chiefs a 38-10 lead, and then Andrew Luck went on a tear and brought them back to win 45-44. That was one of the crazier games I think I've ever seen, but Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in NFL history, maybe the best ever to not win a Super Bowl yet, and I think the Andy Reid coaching tree is actually better than the Bill Belichick tree. Even if you gave Belichick some of the Bill Parcells coaching tree, I think that Andy Reid has got him beat with his disciples. He's just an offensive genius, and the old school line up and whoop the guy in front of you style of play that the Colts operate on isn't going to work against a guy like Andy Reid, especially when he has an extra week to prepare for you. Chiefs win 34-28. Eagles at Saints. When we were doing playoff projections a few weeks ago, this one never came up. The Eagles have made an epic run here, and they have neutralized some impact players on defense to get here. And what else can be said about Nick Foles? I mean, this guy is hard not to root for. It may sound crazy, but if he wins this game, the Eagles really have have to be entertaining the idea of moving Carson Wentz and keeping Foles. I know that Wentz gives you that bright future, but Foles gives you that here and now jolt. All right, let me log off of Madden real quick, because the problem with that is that Foles really didn't provide that spark coming into the season, and I think that it's more likely that this winner go home urgency has elevated the play of everyone on this Eagles squad. They have a really talented roster, and there was no secret about that coming into the season, but injuries depleted their secondary early on and made it difficult to stop offenses. The Eagles had some real unsung heroes playing out there in Chicago, and they made the necessary plays to keep the Bears offense in check. This week, they get to go back to New Orleans and try to redeem themselves for that 48-7 ass whooping the Saints gave them in week 11, which was probably the lowest point of the season for this Eagles team. The Saints wanted the Cowboys this week. They may have to wait another week for that matchup. Now they're going to come off of a relaxing week and have to get it started again to beat a team for the second time when they had very little resistance in the first time. So I remember from playing sports that complacency can really mess with you in a scenario like this. When you just handled a team to the degree of 48-7, it's really easy to assume that it's going to come that easy again. So I expect the Eagles to jump on the Saints early in this one and surprise them with a really well scripted first couple of possessions. But while it's been quite a ride for the Eagles, over the course of 60 minutes, I think the Saints at home are going to be too much for the Eagles, and most notably their secondary. Saints win 38-35. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the championship round because I had both of these matchups played out in my last predictions videos. If you want to hear about those, go check that out. Let's move right on to the superlatives. Alright, and now for my divisional round superlatives, and these are going to be all most likely to blank. If you guys have any more of these that you'd like me to do for next week, go ahead and leave them in the comments. So first up, I've got most likely to pull the upset. I've actually got two teams for this, and the first one's the Chargers, which I picked, so obviously I think that they're the most likely to pull the upset, and that's, like I said, I just think that they have a better roster, but the other team is the Cowboys, and take it or leave it, being a Cowboys fan, like I said, this is not a great matchup for them. The Rams have not won a playoff game with this current setup that they've got right now with Sean McVay, Jared Goff, and Todd Gurley, and all those guys. Let's see if they are prepared and ready to going into this one, if they learned from last year and they're one and done, and that they're better prepared to execute this week. So I definitely think that they are on upset alert. I guess I could go ahead and just rank all of these guys. I think that the Chiefs would probably be next on that, just because they've got a history of sort of falling short in the playoffs, and that the Colts are just that good of a team. And then the last team with the chance to pull the upset is the Eagles. That's not a knock on them. It's just that the Saints are that good at home, and it's going to be a really challenging matchup for them. Next up, I've got most likely to throw the most touchdowns, and this one's another easy one for me. That's why I need you guys' help to come up with some more challenging ones for me to do next week. But I just thought that this would be fun. I think that this week the most likely person to throw the most touchdowns has got to be Patrick Mahomes, and that's not a shot at the Colts defense. That's just because that's how the Chiefs offense operates. They are a volume offense, and they like to throw the ball and they like to put points up. The guy that I think is most likely to get shut down, and this is somebody that usually produces at a high level, and this week I think that it's Todd Gurley, and it's for the same reasons as what I said earlier. I think that Todd Gurley is the most likely guy to get shut down because he's had quite a long break here, and he might have a little rust to shake early on. He might be pressing a little bit early on, maybe not being as patient of a runner as we've come to expect with him. So I could see him getting shut down maybe at least for the first half, and then probably if he does produce at a high level, I could see it end up being through the passing game. And then the player I think most likely to make a defensive impact, it's got to be Aaron Donald. He's going to be matched up with the interior of the Cowboys offensive line for the most part. And on one side, you've got Zach Martin, who's been a 5-time All-Pro, but he's gimpy and has struggled with guys to Aaron Donald's degree in the past. But I'm more concerned if Connor Williams has to start and they are able to line Aaron Donald up over Connor Williams. That is a god-awful matchup, and Aaron Donald could single-handedly shut down the Cowboys offense in this game. And then the last superlative that I have is the team most likely to get blessed by the refs. Guys, you know that I've been on the train for this one for a while. The Saints have been blessed by the refs all season long. The NFL loves this narrative that they are unbeatable at home, but like I said, I think that they're going to come out a little sluggish and slow and be caught off guard by the Eagles and how fast that they're playing, and they may need a blessing or two to get back in this game to make sure that they can secure the win. So that's who I think is the most likely to get blessed by the refs. I hope you guys liked this. This was just something I did after I'd prepared everything I wanted to say. I just thought it would seem like a cool idea. But that's going to do it here for my divisional round picks. Thanks as always for watching, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff. Remember, we are trying to reach our goal of 500 likes, so if you enjoyed this video, help a brother out, hit that like button, and I promise that mock draft is going to be out this week. Thank you for being one of the legends that stays to the end. I will see you in the next video.